Thank you so much, Dr. Magid, for his insightful analysis on social justice in Egypt. Is it better to measure or not to measure? This is the question. When I talked about some of the political leaders, in fact, the center conducted a very good study on measuring the social justice. Ms. Hoda El-Abbadi will present the presentation, but Dr. Abla might want to comment first. Thank you so much, Dr. Magid, for your excellent presentation. I will start off where you left off. This observatory is an objective for the center because it's really important to follow up on the numbers, whether to increase, whether the inequality dimensions increase, and where exactly does this happen. And this, of course, should be translated into different policies. What we tried to do, and Hoda El-Abbadi will present, she's an economist, she's an AUC graduate, she's a master's holder, and she's studying with Dr. Ragi Asad. She's so lucky to take part in the course he moderates. We changed the model a little bit. We added some variables, whether in gaps or in the fundamental indicators under health or education. It's a work in progress. Second, we also changed the weights. So maybe if we assign different weights, change will ensue, and Hoda will present this now. Good morning, everyone. Expansion and extension for the social justice indicators. What are the additions? We modified some of the weights, and we will pose food for thought questions. After some additions, we named the indicator ESJ plus. We changed something in health, and we added R&D, debt servicing, and environment. As for the health, the fundamental variables with infant mortality, nutrition, illness, mental health, and we added the actual capacity for sanitation plants, and this will be reflected in the gap between upper and rural areas. Of course, 80% of Egyptian villages lack sanitation, and this is really important for disease prevention. So there is a room for policy reformulation or change. The equation we use is the total actual capacity for sanitation plants divided by the government population to get the average per capita, and then we compared the capacity per capita in Upper Egypt to the capacity per capita in Lower Egypt. In the debt surfacing, we added the external debt as percentage of the NDP, and this will be reflected, and we got this from the Ministry of Finance through the monthly bulletin. Egypt started depending on the external debt to develop, to fund the development project, which might cause a burden, and debt servicing amount to 541 billion Egyptian pounds. The formula used is the debt to NDP ratio in 2016 and 2006. Why should we worry about the debt when it comes to social justice? The amount of debt servicing is 541 billion Egyptian pounds, double the wage, 5 times education budget, and 9 times the health budget. We also added the environmental dimension with 2 variables. measuring the air quality, measuring the CO2 dimensions, and the other indicator measure the quality of the Nile water, taking into consideration BOD, COD, and TDS. And all these variables will be reflected in the intergenerational gap and upper to lower Egypt gap. This information is from CapMass 2005-2006 and 2016, because this is the latest data available. Why we added this? Because environmental sustainability is a main condition for development, and the worse the condition is, the harder it is for future generations to cope. We cost the median of each indicator in Upper Egypt and compared it to Lower Egypt. As for air quality, we divided the CO2 emissions by the number of population. And the latest dimension added is the R&D, spending on R&D as a percentage of the NDP, and this will be reflected in the intergenerational gap. And the main source was the development indicators. And of course, spending on R&D will have a positive impact on future generations, but might deprive current generations from spending on consumption or investment. The formula is taking the R&D spending as a percentage of the NDP and comparing this to the spending on 2005. We want to have an additional indicator measuring the percentage of technical secondary education enrollment as a percentage of the overall education enrollment, to measure the gap between the poor and the rich, comparing the ECJ1 and the ECJ1 plus. The results might be the same, because all the additions would have a horizontal nature. There's another way to calculate the indicator without certain weight or weighted. So we calculated the indicator after assigning a certain weighted, and we named it ESJ1++. So all the weights, the scenario one is having equal weight, and then in the second scenario we assigned 3 times weight for the intergenerational gap, and then we added certain weights to certain indicators. So for the income gap, it was 3 times weighted. The same is applied to access to knowledge, and then double the weight is assigned to participation in R&D, because this will reflect access to infrastructure, to ICT, and also because the education cannot accommodate the disenrollment rates. As for the income gap, of course, social justice goes beyond the income generation, but income is still a basic measurement in this regard. As for R&D spending, this is the heart of any sustainable development and the basis for achieving any social justice. Of course, participation reflects political freedom, and culture and recreation affects positively on the overall decent life.
After the modifications and added weights is the first scenario. This is the one you found that the total after the gap, the intergenerational gap was tripled in weight. You found that it stood, the indicator at 2.7, and then it moved to 2.31. The questions that are being discussed, what are the indicators that could reflect social justice? What are the variables that could be added, and can we address income as a gap because of the availability of data? Also, could the index be published annually? There must be monitoring of the indices and the social justice annually. The challenges in the availability of accurate data, and conducting a survey with the Basira Center, and also conducting a survey across the Arab world through the Egyptian Center or the Egyptian Center for Economic Studies and the Economic Research Forum. You find that Egypt stands in the lowest quintile group. The Also, the youth advancement indicator includes a lot of aspects, and most importantly, the lack of social justice is attributed to the lack of equal opportunity, which affects the future. Egypt ranks 77 out of 122 countries, according to the said report. These were our attempts that we launched, and all are under these studies, are under these ongoing studies. The indicator might be perceived as a total figure, or it could be perceived as a part of the human capital individually. So it could be looked at and explored from different angles. We have covered the previous attempts that was launched and pioneered by Dr. Megad Osman, and the two new reports and the indicators that are going to be produced. Now we would like to give the devil his due and talk about the first one who tackled the Human Development Index was Dr. Kansouh. She's among the audience. Dr. Soheir has 30% of expertise in the UN agency, was responsible for developmental projects. She also was part of the National Council for Women. And I would like to ask Dr. Soheir in 2 minutes to talk about the human development cycle, which was the point of departure. I'd like to thank you, Dr. Abla, because you always refer to the past. I'll try to be very precise, very brief, and talk about what this cycle stands for. This cycle is a summary of meetings held with senior figures, including Ismail Sabri Abdullah and the elite sociologists and politicians, in order to guide us on the involvement of human development in Egypt. The bottom of line, I tried to incorporate the nuts and the thrust of these meetings and this cycle, and how to put it into practice. When we look at the heart of this, so the axis of this cycle, are the people, but in order to be able to reach them, you have to go through a lot of policies, a lot of sectors, a lot of programs, a lot of implementations, and after that you're going to have priorities and emergency that have to be addressed promptly, which would receive all the attention. And then we have long term, which have the most enduring impacts. And there are two pillars that are usually left out, including the civil society and the science and technology. But in order to incorporate all of these aspects and to reach the people, you have to go through all of these barriers. So this is how we started the segregation, at the geographical level, and then on the gender level and the poverty level. And as a matter of fact, I cannot state how happy I was with Dr. Osman and the ECES attempts, because we can see the progress. It's very remarkable, it's very pronounced, and it is very impressive that you have managed to reach the disaggregation, because when we have the two aggregates, we have two aggregate indicators, you cannot reach the roots of the problem. With regards to the age gap, in the early 90s, I started the life cycle approach to human development study, and in 1996. If you allow me, in the human development report, there were some budding attempts at this, and also the comparison between the different categories of countries is very difficult, because if we have 3,000 illiterate people out of 70,000, it's very hard to do this proportion. So I would like to thank you for that. I cannot put all of these works into only in 2 minutes, but I would like to say that in 1995, this was Egypt's attempt to achieve social justice concept, and was awarded the first award, Dr. Osman and Dr. Abla. I would like to ask them I would like to thank them for this study, and ask them to put it on the map, on the global map, because I have not seen anything with such clarity before. I'd like to thank Dr. Soheir Kansouh-Habib. She is a real pioneer, and when she started off, there were two different schools, Dr. Said Sabri Abdullah, Said al-Naggar. On the other hand, there were very interesting discussions from the new call associations, and most of the meetings revolved at that point about social justice, and that, and a lot of credit goes to Dr. Soheir. I would like to thank Hoda El-Abbadi, who worked hard. I'd like to thank you, Hoda, but you have blindsided us with the numbers of external debts.